So I'm Carla Buchholz. I'm one of the registered provisional psychologists at Insight Psychological. My areas of specialization and expertise are anxiety, trauma, sexuality and gender, sex therapy, and religious trauma specifically. Religious trauma or spiritual trauma can be experiences that we have in high control groups. Where a lot of our identity is controlled, a lot of our experiences are controlled, and it's often from a spiritual perspective. So there's often a belief in hell or punishment. There's often different emphasis on what life is about, what morality is. So religious trauma is really the embodiment of oppression that different high control groups, often in religious circles, has on people. Religious trauma occurs when harm is caused from either religious institutions or spiritual leaders who try to control or manipulate or recruit individuals into believing in that system, which is often very highly controlled or rigid. So often that control is really something that's valued, and it's not seen as control, it's seen as love, which can be incredibly confusing and distressing for people to try to work through. And it often translates into internalized beliefs and values that really do influence our perspectives. Religious trauma happens often when we don't even realize it, because it's so accepted and it's conditional norm. So for people who have been indoctrinated into religion, like myself, I grew up in a fundamentalist family, and our whole value system, our whole understanding of the world and the purpose of life and how we interact with others is controlled by, in my case, a certain interpretation of scripture. So a lot of the time, there is shame and guilt over basic human experiences. And the way that trauma works is we internalize those ideas and beliefs so that it impacts how we even kind of feel about ourselves and how we interact with others. So a lot of the time, religious trauma can translate through language that can be hateful. It can come through homophobia, racism, slavery, and a lot of it has to do with sexuality. So one of the parts that I really focus on with clients is deconstructing purity culture and the effects of that on concept of self and identity, and the roles that we play in our lives. So some of the signs and symptoms of religious trauma or spiritual trauma, even if we're unaware of it, can be constant anxiety or hypervigilance. Often our nervous system feels under attack all the time, which can cause exhaustion, depression, other types of anxiety. It can cause intrusive thoughts, increased suicidality, self-judgment, lack of compassion, difficulty with interpersonal connections and communication, challenges with setting boundaries and maintaining healthy boundaries. The list goes on. To begin starting the journey of healing from religious trauma, it's really important to rediscover a sense of self. So when you might be noticing some thoughts that don't align with your belief system and find it difficult to come to terms with what's accepted and what isn't, that can be a sign that it's time to get help. Dichotomous thinking, where there's, one part of your brain can rationalize it and then the other part of your brain can't. And that can be quite distressing. In addition to that, I feel like to begin the process, it really involves an openness of learning. A lot of the things that we struggle with in religious trauma is a conditioned response or conditioned beliefs. So really having the space and time and compassion to work through those beliefs, to actually try to understand what's going on, instead of explaining it away. Often the beginning parts of the journey of working through religious trauma with the client is providing a space where it's safe for them to explore their thoughts and beliefs, providing validation, which is often something that can be seen as a sin, as well as empathy. So really providing that to create a space to hold what that person has been experiencing, and working at their pace to better understand why there's distress. Another thing about religious trauma that's important to know is that it can be really isolating and alienating when you're working through the process of figuring out what spirituality and religion means to you. It is different for everyone. Everyone's journey is different, everyone's deconstruction is different, and that's okay. The thing that's important to notice is that in a way, deconstructing and pulling away from that system will cause you to lose some of that community. And that can be really difficult. So I would suggest really seeking support from people who really care about you and understand your process, I guess.